Welcome to the C-Suite. Thanks for joining us for another episode. This week, we're talking about developing leaders without creating disasters. Leadership development is a long game, and when it's rushed or misaligned, the consequences ripple far beyond one role. In this episode, we explore the delicate art of growing future leaders without leaving a trail of collateral damage. So, how do you spot leadership potential early and nurture it with intention instead of assumptions?
I'll take this one first. You see, I really love this question because it's a great big why. Why is this question important when you're in the C-suite? And the answer is every organization needs people to take responsibility for things. You need project leadership. You need cross-team collaboration work that needs to get done, and people who knows how to take a task and run with it without being micromanaged. So you're always looking for those that have this potential of taking charge and leading things in the most appropriate and optimal way. So you're constantly looking at trying to figure out who might fit into those types of roles. So part of your role as a C-suite professional is you're looking at everyone with that potential, and some have different levels of that potential. Now, how do you measure if someone has the potential to reach to a manager level role or project management? You can assign them a big project that has cross-functional teams that they got to work with and take charge of. My measurements, I usually have like 5 different things I think about. The first 3 I've talked about in some of our past sessions, which is the foundation of my philosophy on how we operate as a team toward each other. It's the IOU program. It's integrity, so a high sense of integrity. Ownership, the O, high sense of ownership, meaning no stone goes unturned. You take it the extra mile. You're good at follow up and follow through. And then the U is urgency, a high sense of urgency. You got to know how to prioritize or triage the things that are being thrown at you to know how to handle somebody who feels like they have an emergency issue, but you've got another bigger emergency. You got to be able to handle those different hugs in the most optimal way for the mission of the firm. So if you've got that IOU, I look for people who have those IOU, good foundations. And a lot of those are inherently within someone. So you look at them over time and how they operate and coaching them so they have the best IOU for themselves, for the team, and for the customers. 2 items I look at are they calm under pressure? When things go wrong or things become adversarial or terse, or you get angry people or people who are frustrated vocally about whatever's going on. If you find people that are very calm under that pressure and be able to think through the problems and help the people, talk people out of the tree, but still solve the problems, that's a wonderful quality I look for in our future leaders. And another one is just a general respect for others. You've got to have a really strong ability to respect not just the people that work for you, but the people who you work for and our customers. So having that respect for others is a critical foundation. So those are kind of my 5 foundational things or signals of potential for a person who might be a leader. And then I might look at those that are struggling in certain areas, and you got to be able to nurture those, stretch their assignments, give them opportunities to grow their skills and abilities so they can adapt to whatever level of achievement of leadership that they are looking for. A little harder to do, though, when you're interviewing, right? So you only have 1 to a few hours when you're looking at hiring for a leadership role position. So trying to identify and ferret out who's going to be those leaders, it's tougher. So how do you ask those questions? That's a whole nother discussion I think we'll probably have at some point. But I think the leadership potential shows up in how someone carries out the responsibilities every day, pretty consistently, long before they have that title. So that's what I look for in the leadership potential and who I might start raising to the level of opportunities for them to excel and see how far they can stretch themselves into future leadership roles.
That IOU thing is very clever.
It was developed over many years of hardship, of understanding what are the real dynamics of someone's style and innate inherited instincts that make them super successful in law firms. And I've mentioned this before. Attorneys are really good about sniffing baloney, and that's that integrity. If you don't have that as your foundation, you're done. If you don't have good smart ownership of things. You don't make it in law firms. And the urgency, of course, everything is urgent in a law firm, but you got to be able to understand where to apply the urgent resources for each individual thing thrown your way. So it's just hard fought one philosophy I've developed over the years.
I think it's great. I mean, you're right. Interviewing is a completely different skill set and ability to see how people are going to perform in the role. And I love to be able to see someone act like they have the role before they actually have the title. It's comforting to know that they know what is expected of the role. But what happens when a promotion doesn't go as planned? How do you handle that, and what do you do? How did you learn from something like that?
I can take a stab at that one. And I think there's a couple ways we can look at this question. First of all, I think it was an excellent question. And whoever asked it of us, I'm glad that they did. One is I've had at least one position in my career where the job that I was in is radically different than what I was told it was going to be. And the most professional way I could describe that situation was I asked myself the question, okay, what can I learn from this? And approaching it from the perspective that it was going to be a series of learning moments and I was going to be exposed to a variety of things that I wasn't expecting, that type of thing. And ultimately, I would say I am the better for that experience, although that experience wasn't on my roadmap. So that's one. The other of which is when you're a boss and you promote somebody and their performance is different than what was expected. I think you can ask yourself a couple of questions. One is this a situation that can be salvaged? That's a pragmatic question that has to be asked and answered. And if the answer is yes, well, then what type of participation do you need to bring to the table as that person's boss or somebody of influence? And one of which is showing, here's different ways how a problem can be solved. A conversation about, well, here was the event and here's what happened and here's what was observed. What was your intent versus what was heard by other people, and trying to help that person see things from a slightly different perspective or become more aware of all the elements that are in play. And then on occasion, and I think you learn this over the course of time as a hiring manager, when you're early in your career, you tend to spot something that you like in somebody and you suddenly have a tremendous amount of hope, or you presume that they're going to be more like that one instance that you observed. Think of a person playing basketball. If you see somebody make a 3-point shot, it's natural for you to think, oh, wow, they can make a lot of 3-point shots. They might have been able to make one. As you get further along in your career, you recognize the value. And I think this is some of the things that Skip was talking about, the value of past performance, a consistency that they bring to the table. You get to observe their methodology and operation. You get to see them when times are good or when times are not good, or when times are stressful or when times are critical, that type of things. When I mean critical, like we got to get this done by Friday or something's not working. Not as in, somebody's grammatically hacking up your report, because that's going to happen too. So what would I do differently now? Well, if I could go back 20 years and talk to myself, it would be find people and observe them doing something that is of interest in a very, very positive way. See if you can have more opportunities to observe them doing interesting things so that you have greater familiarity with their track record or which way that they're going to be going with, I'll call it their leadership inertia. And if you're in a position of influence, give them opportunities that are both a challenge but solvable, and increase the difficulty level over a reasonable amount of time. So it's one thing to say, I would like you to do the following 10 things in order. Okay, so you've spelled it out. Okay, it's another thing to say, okay, tell you what, based upon your last experience, I need you to do these 5 things. The first 5 were implied. The last 5 are what mattered. And then as the person develops further, you can say, okay, can you do that again? And when they are able to understand what's being asked, perform in the context that is expected, and deliver what is actually required and exceed those expectations, then that promotion becomes really, really easy, and your chances of success with that individual goes through the roof.
That's mentoring, right? That's part of the gig that we're all signed up for, is mentoring the people in our team, but also the ones that are outside of our team that you're involved with, and keeping the continuous growth pattern going, especially if you see somebody struggling. So how do you balance mentoring others while still delivering your own results?
So I'm going to jump in on this one. Stacey, you were talking about sort of continuous behavior, right? And I think about this question, as like there's always a time and a place for structured mentoring, right? I think we all wish that it could happen with more frequency than perhaps an annual or semi-annual review cadence where you sit down and you check a bunch of boxes and you talk about what went well and you talk about what went poorly and how to improve it. But, I think that, being transparent as you can, and being as visible, or providing as much visibility into how you act and lead, and adopting kind of a continuous mentoring posture really ultimately, it does well to sort of foster growth for your people. But also, I think in the end, when you talk about sort of how do you balance, delivering on the things that you need to do with also mentoring, like having this kind of continuous posture really ultimately pays dividends, because mentoring is kind of woven into your day-to-day process in a few different ways, right? Like, when I have people that are promoted or people that are newly working for me, one of the first things that I try to talk to them about is that I like people to kind of lead with intention, or lead with intent rather, I guess is a better way to say it. So when we might be in a sticky situation, whether there's an outage or there's something going on, my expectation isn't that people are going to come to me and say, what do I do? Right? My expectation is that they're going to come to me and tell me what they intend to do, so that I have an opportunity either to sign off on it or to offer feedback or redirection if necessary. And it's sort of a relatively simple paradigm shift, but I think over time it does a couple of things, right? It creates a strong sense of ownership by these individuals, right, as they are, leading their teams, because ultimately now we're at a point where many or most of us are sort of managing or mentoring managers, right? And then, secondarily, I think it gives them an opportunity for the future to anticipate how I think about things and how I respond in certain situations, which is important because I want people to be able to take action even if I'm not available, right? I don't want anyone waiting on me to sign off on something. And so I think trying to give them that shift so that they're coming with intention as opposed to looking for direction is important. And it's really just another form of kind of mirroring, right? Which is something that I try to do a lot of, right? I invite people into situations where they can see me either, creating something simple like creating a response to a question, or feedback from someone, or ultimately it might mean inviting people into a meeting where I'm presenting to my leadership on something, right? So whether that's in my case, it could be our executive committee or our partners board, or even just my, the my direct manager, right? Giving my people an opportunity to see how I conduct those sessions really helps them in a couple of different ways, but it creates an opportunity and it creates an opportunity for me to have the meeting after the meeting, right? 10 minutes later, I can sit down with people and say, why do you think that I crafted the message in a certain way? Or why do you think that, I presented, this important initiative to the partners board in the way that I did, right? And it gives them an opportunity to have insight into how I'm thinking about things. And so again, it's just kind of another step in that day to day, and it's intentional, but it really does become just kind of part of that continuous posture. And then I think the only other thing I would add is that I also like to create opportunities for like fail safe, right? So, if somebody is leading an initiative, right, you establish parameters and you say, listen, if you want to you're leading this rollout, you own it, and here's the guardrails, right? They are, no impact on production systems, and you have to deliver the project within, X percentage of this budget, right? Kind of thing. Like very just kind of, basic guardrails or parameters. And then ultimately they have an opportunity to grow, and if it fails, right, if it fails and it's not in production, then they can learn from that, or people can learn from that failure, I think, which is important and something that Jim and Skip were both alluding to. And so, at the end of the day, I think kind of you build this behavior just into how you sort of lead on a day-to-day basis.
So that's a lot more than just one-on-one mentoring or choosing someone that is an heir apparent and positioning them to succeed, right? You're talking about creating a whole culture.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think that is that sort of culture of intention, ultimately, again, like comes back to you in dividends, right? Because I guess it takes time, right? I mean, everything takes time, but as the longer that your team has been with you, then the more kind of naturally they'll intuit how you might manage through a particular situation, right? Which gives you time and confidence and certainly a lower stress level, I think, perhaps. But I don't know, Jim or Skip may have other thoughts about it.
No, I agree. That leadership culture that you can model is seen through uh, the eyes of your fellow team members, whether they be peers or subordinates, and how you react, sure, to the day-to-day things, how you're making people feel, seeing you follow through and follow up with customers, the attorneys, the paralegals, the secretaries, but especially so during those challenging things, which I think is what you were talking about, Michael. When things really go wrong, people are watching everything that you do. So if you react in panic or you react with angry, demeanor or frustration or bristle, then it's very possible that what you're really doing is you're creating a culture to train the future leaders. That's how you react when things start going wrong. And to me, that's not what I'm trying to go for. I'm trying to get the future leaders to understand that when things are really going wrong, that's when you really dig in and you become the most consistent, calm person in those situations to think through the problem. It's all business problems. We just have to figure out how to address the business problem. So break it down to business problems we can bite off and chew, and we'll work through them until we're done.
Yeah. And it's funny you say that, because when you were talking at the beginning, Scoop, when you're talking about, sort of spotting leadership potential, I have a couple of things that I look for, but what you just talked about is really like number one on my list, right? It's in a challenging situation, how is someone working through that, right? And there's a couple of things, right? There's sort of like emotional intelligence, which you're talking about, right? Which is, how do we respond calmly? How do we reason through a particular set of circumstances? But there's another piece of it in my mind, which is like, do they take ownership of it? And are they, is someone deflecting, right? Or are they coming to you and saying, hey, this rollout, like I just went through maybe 6 months ago and I managed conversion, right? So if someone came to me and said, man, we really hit this critical hurdle in the iManage rollout, but they come to me immediately and they say, here's what we did about it, and here's what we're going to do to make sure it doesn't happen again, right? And that is like a critical marker for me in spotting someone that I think is ultimately going to be on a leadership trajectory.
I mean, that's demonstrating leadership.
Sure.
And everybody has a chance to do it. Some of us more frequently than we want, but everybody has a chance to do it usually.
A couple of, I'll call it one-liners that I've heard over the years that I think can add a little bit of, say, sprinkles on top of a nice cake that we all just made. One of which is predictability. And when you're leading a team, it's really easy to be friendly when things are good or unstressful. It's another thing to have composure when it's the opposite. And people watch and such. If folks have a sense of how you're going to perform when things are tough, they'll be able to perform. If folks have the sense that they need to be afraid when you get tense, okay, they're going to do everything in their power to make sure that they don't make a mistake. There's a huge difference between solving a problem versus somebody who's just working to not make a mistake. We need people to solve problems. I heard this phrase one time: adversity doesn't create character, it exposes it. So when times get tough, as a leader, show them who you are. Hey, we are here to get this job done. Mistakes will be made. We will ask questions at the end, what we could do better next time. But let's focus on restoring service, getting the project done, meeting the deadline, delighting somebody, and then we'll figure out how we can improve upon it next time. There's that. And I would say the last of which, and this is really, really important, in the moment, I think you need to let people know, sometimes one-on-one, particularly the person who's at that point, who's either, this might be too much for them, or we need that person to be the person who brings the magic, and let them know, I got your back. It's going to be okay. I got your back. And even if it's wrong, I got your back. And it's been my professional experience that when I share that sentiment, they give it their all. And the times that I've directly experienced it in my career, when I needed to hear it from somebody, suddenly I go from what's going to happen to I'm going to make it happen.
Yeah, I think that is really important. I used to, earlier on in my career, I used to think that I have a fairly like even and calm personality just inherently. And so when there's a crisis, that kind of carries through. And there have been a couple of times where I've heard that feedback, like, sort of that the party line, like, thanks so much for your sort of calm stewardship, or however you want to phrase it, right? And early in my career, I would think, gosh, do they think that I don't care? Do they think I'm not fired up enough? Do they think I'm not invested enough because I'm not, shouting from the rooftops or standing on a chair in the middle of the network operations center, or whatever the case may be, right? But ultimately, as you mature in leadership, you understand that aggression isn't necessarily influence, right? And so you're not gonna, you got to figure out how to get to the right outcome by maintaining that calm demeanor. And so I like the way that you put that, Jim.
And building on your comment, Michael, there's a big difference between being intense and tense.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Eyes on the prize. We are getting this done. Hey, everybody, let's say it out loud. We are doing this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
However, there's a lot of different ways to sell that sentiment, but you can, in my opinion, you can help build a culture of leadership so you got to talk the talk, and more importantly, you got to walk the talk.
I love that, Jim. Intense versus tense. I love that.
Yes.
I thought about this particular topic. I think about what people need in the moments of real struggle. They need a foundation to stand on top of. And in the C-suite, you're the foundation. You are the rock. And if you aren't the rock, there won't be anybody else to provide that level footing for people to step up on and figure out where to go from there. You've got to be that first foundational calmness step for them to move forward.
Yeah. You've got to be the calm in the chaos. You can't be the chaos. It's not what we're here for. Okay. Well, thank you, gentlemen. Another excellent episode. I really appreciate your thoughts on all of this. And to our audience, thanks for joining us for So You Want to Join the C-Suite, where we go behind the title and inside the realities of law firm leadership. We'll be back next time for bad advice and broken playbooks.
Looking forward to it.
Likewise. Thanks, Stacey. Thanks, Jim.
Thank you.
Right.
Take care.
Thanks, Skip. All right.